Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this week's Lunch and Learn. My name's Sally, and I will be hosting the session today. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians on the land that each of us are joining from. For me, that's the Darkinjung people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging. So like I said, my name's Sally. I'm the Inclusive Employment Australia Policy Manager at Disability Employment Australia, and I'll be hosting today's session. We will be joined by Darren Coppin, Dr Darren Coppin, who is the CEO and Chief Behavioural Scientist, and he will be talking to us today about building trust and the science of building trust and engagement. So these Lunch and Learn webinars are a partnership between Disability Employment Australia and the Centre for Inclusive Employment Australia. The session today is being recorded and a recording will be made available to you after the session ends, as well as the slides from today's presentation. Today's session might be a little bit more interactive than some of the sessions that we've had over the past couple of weeks. So there'll be some opportunities to participate along the way. But as always, please put any questions that you have into the chat or the Q&A, and we'll endeavour to answer those at the end. If you are needing the live captions, you can turn them on using the CC button at the bottom of your screen. And Liv will also put some instructions about accessing closed captions and a link so that you can view them on a separate screen in the chat. So before we move, so today Dr Darren Coppin will be talking to us about the science of building trust and engagement. Darren is the CEO and Chief Behavioural Scientist at Azuma. And he has quite an extensive background in employment services, both in the UK and Australia, and uses that experience combined with his clinical knowledge and skills in his present day work. So without any further ado, I'll hand over to Darren to take us through today's session. Thank you, Darren.
Thanks, Sally. Excellent. Right. Well, let's get cracking on this session. As implied by Sally, we have the opportunity for you to send some Q&A, particularly for me to answer at the end. I'll also be asking you some rhetorical questions during this session where you can answer if you like, but answer to yourself. But if you have any particular answers or things you want to throw in, then stick them in the chat, which I'll be checking on and off while we're going through this, so that you can as Sally implied, be a little bit more interactive. We've all got you on mute because nobody wants to hear you munching on your Subway and supping on your coffee right now. But we do have the chat and Q&A for general questions afterwards as well, if you like. Now, let me share my slides and let's get cracking. So, brain hacking and fast tracking. Why on earth are we going to talk about the science of building trust and engagement? Why is it relevant to us? In general, why? What is the point of you giving up your precious lunchtime to listen to this? Well, I'll give you two key reasons. First of all, I spent all of last week in Canberra, and I had a number of meetings with Treasury, with an Assistant Minister for Employment, with DEWA, and with the Department of Social Services. Specifically, the lady in the Department of Social Services, Kelly Spence, who's really responsible for the IEA, had a whiteboard behind her. And I always make a habit of sneaking a look at what people have on their whiteboards. And she had 4 things written in bold on that whiteboard. One was service offering in capitals. The other was customers. And then under that, she had coaching and less onerous process. So it gives you an idea and an insight into their thought patterns, because one other phrase came up in all 4 of those meetings with the Minister, with Treasury, with DEWA and with DSS. And that was conversation, not interrogation. That's what they really want to see under the IEA. Now, it's hard when we're sanctioning or there's mutual obligations or there's a lot of paperwork and processes to follow to have a conversation. But we're going to sort of try and learn some tips today where that really helps us. But there's a second reason for doing this and learning how to engage a little bit better using brain hacks. And that's because it works. In front of us is a chart that showed a DES provider last April, May, and June was getting on average about 52% attendance appointment turn-ups. I don't know if that's pretty standard for most of us, but half of people wouldn't turn up because they had something else on. They wouldn't tell them, they'd rearrange. And it's a bit annoying for us because the hypothesis is that if more customers turn up to our sessions, then we can help them and move them forward. So what we did was we undertook a little 6-hour training session with a lot of the content we'll cover today in much more quickly. And we found attendance increased by 16% only in the 2 trial ESAs. In the other ESAs where we hadn't undertaken this training with the employment consultants, there was no increase in attendance. So we know it works. So let's go on. As a behavioral scientist, I know that we like things in threes. So what we're going to cover over the next half an hour, and that's to give you enough time to go over any key questions that you have at the end that Sally will put to me, is we're going to have one key driver of engagement. We're going to discuss that. Then we're going to talk about 2 ways of engaging people, 2 key ways of engaging with our customers, and then 3 other key hacks that we've found are really useful in working with our customers. Now, look, some of these you might sneakily put into your own personal lives. I certainly try to, but there's some really interesting stuff here, so I hope you enjoy it. So, what is the one key driver of human engagement? This is a rhetorical question. Have a think. What is the one key driver of human engagement? Well, human actions are driven by communication, altruism, and a need to trust. We have an absolute need to trust. Now, specifically for our job seekers, our customers, they are also intensely influenced by a fear of embarrassment and isolation. So that helps us outline some principles and opportunities in engaging with our customers. Now, how long does it take to really get to know our customers? This is a question I've chatted through and asked several hundred employment consultants. And the answer, the most common answer I've received back over the last decade is that it takes 6 months to really get to know our customers, to build trust and be able to move them forward so that they actually listen to us. Now, the problem with this contract, not least the financial implications, is that we haven't got 6 months to build up that trust. We need to try to do it quicker. We need to fast track trust building. So the beauty is that humans have a lot of biases, heuristics, and hacks that we can use to really help us engage with our customers. We've lived for 300,000 years, and we've really existed for that long, but we've only lived and worked the way we do for 0.5% of human history. So it's that other 99.5% of human history that informs little hacks and biases and things we do naturally and subconsciously that we can capitalize on as really good coaches and consultants to really help our customers. Now, most of the time, our campaigns use persuasion, education, and information. Because, we spend $1 billion a year in Australia alone on helping people get back to work. But what do we use? Persuasion, education, information. What improvement does that deliver? Well, there's rarely any evaluation or research. But actually, there's been a brilliant study in the United States where over the last 7 years, they've been spending, again, about $1 billion a year, US dollars, trying to improve financial literacy, particularly amongst lower socioeconomic groups. It's been funded federally by state governments and also by insurers and banks. And what has been the improvement in financial literacy and financial action? Well, it turns out that it changed behavior by 0.7%. So that's like spending about $7 billion. They would have been better divvying up that money and giving it to the individuals, because even that was mostly not amongst the lower socioeconomic group that they were targeting. It was basically worthless, this persuasion, education, and information program. And we'll explore a little bit more why it is. But we know that if we can capitalize on people's brain hacks and the way humans naturally and intuitively behave, we can get, as we've seen, up to 16% improvements in behavior and appointment attendance. So a lot of this stuff you'll do intuitively, but I'm hoping from the 16 little tips that we're going to give you, there might be one that you'll try new when you're working with your next customer. So the question is, how do we build trust? Now, we're starting from, well, let's have a look where we're starting. I undertook a little bit of research with 18 to 24-year-old job seekers, and we asked them, how many of you trust your government-funded employment service provider to help you find a job? Do you trust them? Now, do you think the answer was 17%, 41%, perhaps 62%? Have a little think, have a guess what you think it is. Actually, chuck a few into the chat. See what you think. Is it 17, 42, or 41 or 62%? We're having a few guesses. 41, 17, 17, 41, 41, 41, 17. Exactly. They don't trust us. Well, actually, the result was 62%. 62% of your caseload, albeit that this was a survey with 18 to 24-year-old job seekers, trust you to help them find a job, to help them. And that's massive. We're actually already starting from a really good place. And of course, we try and inspire them with examples and case studies, etc. And they're most inspired by social media influencers and least inspired by peers. Well, actually, the real results, that's what we're expecting, particularly amongst this younger age group of job seekers, but it's mostly the peers. People just like them is what inspires us and what we trust. We least are inspired by social media influencers. So it's really reassuring. So, how do we build trust? There are three clever ways of building trust. Social proof is the first one. If you have social proof, this is where people look to others' actions, opinions, or endorsements to guide their own behavior. This is really useful, particularly when people are feeling uncertain. It's a bias, it's a shortcut that all of us humans have. So people, it turns out, trust those who have already helped people like them. If we can somehow communicate that, then they're going to trust us to help them a bit more. They're going to buy into us. If you can say things like, I've worked with quite a few people in your exact situation, similar background, same challenges, and most of them found work within a few months once we made a few small changes. There's a hell of a lot of psychology going on in a silly little statement like that when you first meet with a job seeker and a customer and try and move them forward. They trust you a lot more. And secondly, if you can somehow display popularity, humans copy what is socially accepted. So you can try and make your support appear popular and normal rather than remedial, because most people are embarrassed to be there to see you. So if you can use phrases that suggest that many others have engaged with you as a consultant successfully, then they're going to buy into you and trust you a lot more. If you can say things like, "Oh, most people I see are surprised how useful this first session is," or try to be modest and humble in how you say it. But nearly everyone I work with finds that employers respond better once we tweak this part of their resume. Or, and I love doing this one because it means you don't have to say any awkward phrases. If you can subtly display some sort of evidence, such as a notice board of job outcomes, or a successes this month poster, or you've got little anonymized emails of thanks pinned up behind you, then people really buy into that. Humans infer trustworthiness from competence and consistency. If you can show that you've been there for others, then you really build trust, and authority cues such as, oh, I've helped this many people into work, they really reduce uncertainty. So it's great. Now we know how to build social proof. How else can we build trust? Well, we can demonstrate understanding. Few things build trust faster than someone feeling seen and understood. In the first few minutes, show that you grasp both their situation and their emotions. And you can say things like, I imagine this whole process has been pretty draining. Most people I meet feel frustrated. They might just want something that feels secure again. What you're doing is signaling empathy and normalizing their experience, reducing defensiveness, and believe it or not, shame. We'll discuss this in a minute, but quite often a lot of job seekers have some sort of sense of embarrassment and shame. And this sort of statement also lowers cognitive threat. It lets our customers' cognitive or rational brain engage again. But there is a little bit of a warning here. And that is, I just said, signal empathy. But empathy, there's a massive warning because empathy is different to compassion. If you're empathetic, it means you're feeling with someone, not just for them. And if you feel with someone, all of their signs of anxiety, stress, depression, embarrassment, then actually you're taking those emotions on yourself, and it is one of the leading causes of burnout in our sector. So be compassionate, feel for somebody, but not with them. Appreciate how they're feeling, but whatever you do, try not to take on their emotions for your own mental health and effectiveness. And then the third way of building trust, the final way, is invest in somebody. If they feel invested in, then they trust you a lot more. Somehow stake your reputation, communicate that your reputation is at stake in helping that individual and that you've got a shared interest and a genuine investment in their success. If you can, trust is built if you expend effort or cost for the benefit of others with no expectation of anything in return. If you can, waste some expense. Okay, this is a deep behavioral survival mechanism. Even if just at the end of the session you say something like, oh, you can keep that pen, they are actually feeling that you're investing in them. So it's a really weird little psychological thing there. So if you can build social proof, demonstrate understanding of that person and invest in them and show that you're invested in them, you've got a shared goal, then you've really built trust there. And that's it. That's the first one covered. So let's go on to how do we really engage with individuals. Hang on a minute. A couple of chat things have come up. Nice. Very, very, very complimentary already, and I'll send you the dollars afterwards. Right. Two ways of engaging with our customers is anchoring, which you might have vaguely heard of, and listening. Particularly for blokes, this is a difficult thing to do. So I'll cover these because you would be aware of listening already. Anchoring, however, is the most underplayed tool that we can use. We really don't use this. Subconsciously, first impressions last. We know that saying, but how often do we think about that when particularly we meet our first customers and we're signing them all up for the new IEA program or meeting somebody again? So let's start at the beginning. How do you engage with somebody when they first come in? What is it you say to somebody? Now, I've observed this again with hundreds and hundreds of interventions and appointments. And more than 70% of the time, we say this one same thing. So it might be popping into your head. What do I say when someone first comes in and sits down? And it's a disaster. But we all do it. Even I've done it when I've been consulting directly, and I kick myself afterwards. We tend to say, "How are you doing?" Well, perhaps not as creepily as Joey might do, but we say, "How you doing?" Now, what is a poor customer going to say when you're saying, "How you doing?" How many of your customers say, "Oh, I'm going great right now. I love life. I'm so happy to be here." Very few of them. Okay. And what it does is it opens up the opportunity for our customers to have a whinge fest. And again, that's driven by embarrassment. Whether they like you or not, they're kind of embarrassed to be there with you. They're trying to communicate at any opportunity that if you'd been through the same set of circumstances as they face, it'd be you sitting in their position and not them. So they're embarrassed. They will use any opportunity to whinge about the issues they're facing, whether it's their dog's sick or their granny's got a bad knee. They'll say, oh, not too well at the moment. That's usually what people say. Hairdressers face this a lot. Hairdressers do not want to have whinge fests all day long, so they never really ask people how you're doing. They ask specific questions, very often things that make people feel positive. Oh, you've been away lately, or you got any holidays planned? That sort of thing. They get people talking about positive things. Now, it's probably not appropriate for us to ask our customers, hey, you got any holidays planned? Oh, yeah, I'm off to the Maldives quite soon. It's not going to happen. There is a little trick that we can use, one that I love doing, that if we're in a session together, then we'll go through this, and it's called Gone in 60 Seconds, where you ask your customer, please describe your life from birth to today in 60 seconds. And they look at you and say, what? And they say, go on, describe your life from birth to today in 60 seconds. Now, first of all, people do like talking to themselves, even though they're kind of awkward at first answering this. But they'll say things like, well, I was born in Tamworth, and I grew up there, with a single parent and four brothers and sisters. And then I went to school, didn't really like it, but I went to the TAFE and I got this qualification. I moved to Dubbo and then to Bathurst, and I got married, but then got divorced and did this and oh blimey, 60 seconds is up. Now what that does is three really deep psychological tricks. Now what's interesting is when you do this with somebody, or if you do it in a group class where you practice this, is that you cannot help the listener cannot help but nod and smile at the person as they're talking it through. You were probably even doing it subconsciously while I was coming up with a rubbish example just then. And that's because humans are generally and genuinely unselfish and kind social animals. We put people at ease for no reason. We can't help but do it because we want to make that person feel comfortable by smiling and nodding and encouraging them. But also, when somebody describes their life in 60 seconds, they actually feel more resilient. They realize that they've been through a lot of change and a lot of tough situations and come out the other side throughout their life. It means that the situation they're in right now and having to be there and meeting with you on the IEA isn't so bad. They've been through such things before and they can get through this as well. It actually reinforces subconsciously that they're resilient and it puts things into perspective for them. For you, the final thing that we learn is what not to mention, what not to ask. Sometimes, occasionally, the odd customer goes into details and issues that are well beyond our pay grade and our qualification to cover. We are not necessarily all psychologists for all people. So they might mention some things that are alarm bells that mean that you can actually support them appropriately, but also not bring up certain subjects because it's not going to move you forward. What not to mention is important. So brilliant. Describe your life so far in 60 seconds. Such a weird little trick and technique, but it's better than saying how you doing. Now, how do we make a good first impression? We all know exactly what to do, but how many of us actually do it when that customer first comes in and sits down with us? Here are the things that came up when I asked a couple of hundred employment consultants, how do you put people at ease? The first one is smiling, simply smiling, and it's sometimes so rare when we're under pressure. The second one is find something to compliment that customer about. Not creepy, but something nice, like about what they're wearing or their haircut or jewelry or whatever, or being on time. There's something weird happens when you compliment somebody. And ECGs, measuring and monitoring of the brain's neurological patterns and the electrical firings in the brain, show that as soon as somebody's complimented, their brain wakes up. They listen to the next thing you say with much more alertness. So complimenting is brilliant because it gets them to pay attention to you and they like you more. Thirdly is try and keep your environment quite nice, quite neat, quite tidy, quite not chaotic. But actually, we did some studies and we found that we said, don't have any things like cuddly teddies there or funny little models of something or a collection of mini cats. But actually, it turns out that if you do have a little two or three things that are personalized about you at your desk, then it makes you more human and it makes the customer like you more and actually engage with you more. So that actually surprised us and was contrary to what we were initially telling a provider to do. Then welcome, actually be genuinely welcoming, and that often starts with your person up at reception, and then be on time. Now, when people come to see you, think about when you go to a doctor's appointment or a medical appointment or the dentist or anywhere, and you're sitting there, as soon as 1 minute is up beyond when your appointment time is, we start to get fidgety, we start to get annoyed, and we start to feel disrespected. And that's the last thing in the world we want our customers to feel, because they're particularly sensitive right now. Being on time isn't always possible. But if you can at least say or message reception and say, I'm running 5 minutes late, and you can even conjure up why you're running 5 minutes late. I'm running 5 minutes late because I've got to get this evidence for a customer that just got a job. And we'll be with you in a minute. Then that actually prepares people. There's been studies. Do you know those signs in train stations that tell you how long the next train's going to be? It turns out people would rather know that their train's going to be 8 minutes there in 8 minutes time than it's going to be there in 3 minutes time, but they don't actually know. They're kept hanging, expecting it to be there right away. So letting people know that you're going to be 5 minutes late actually relaxes people and shows respect. Don't get straight into paperwork. This is absolutely key, but really difficult to not be calling up their case files as they turn up or finishing off from our previous customer. There's something absolutely key, and that is to spend 60 seconds to be absolutely present with that customer when they first come there. And it's really difficult. It requires a lot of self-control and regulation in ourselves. And there's something else with our sessions. It's called the peak end rule. I don't know if you've come across this before, but if something's long and boring, now don't let me suggest that our sessions are long and boring, but to be honest, sign-up sessions are quite often long and boring, and they're having to repeat loads of stuff they've already repeated at Centrelink. Use this peak end rule. People remember the beginning and end of any session with you the best. So if you make the end pleasurable, fun, and engaging, that's what they'll remember. If you make the beginning engaging by just spending 60 seconds with somebody, facing them and listening and smiling, then you follow it up with, if anything you can at the end. And we've tried a couple of things where you say at the end, well, how was that? Not so bad, was it? Well done. I appreciate you being so helpful. See, there's a little compliment worked in there. Whether they were helpful or not, just say it and not without being sarcastic. But saying that gives you a really nice end. It wasn't so bad. It means that when they have to come and see you next time, they're much less likely to cancel. They're much more likely to appreciate, using the word that you used for them, actually being with you and being there. They'll associate you, appreciation and helpfulness, even though you use that to describe them, they're the words that they'll associate with you. So lots of good fun. Okay. Somebody's just said, Hamish. Hello, Hamish. He thinks his dentist uses the peak end rule. Yeah, definitely. Although we don't get sweets anymore at our age, do we, at the end of it? So, anyway, right. So, let's go on to the listening side. Now, this is interesting because I actually used an image before and tested it of a person's actual ear. And it turns out people are they find ears quite off-putting. So I've used a cartoon ear as an illustration for listening here. But listening is so important. Of course, we know it, but active listening. And really, I'm using this to reinforce the first engagement point. But this is 4 ways to get people to really like you. What makes listening active? I think we all know what makes listening active, but let's remind ourselves being present. So I've done that to death in the last 5 minutes, but I cannot overemphasize its importance. Full attention, eye contact or facing towards somebody makes a big difference. You can hear and you can see that they're actually engaging with you. And this is a trick that really works, that even if you do have to have your nose in some paperwork and you're not listening, and I've been using this with my wife while staring at YouTube, if you repeat back the last two words that they just said, they really think that you're engaged and listening to them. So, my wife was going blah, blah, blah. I don't even know what she was saying because I was staring at something about gold panning on YouTube. And then her last two words were next Thursday. And I go, oh, next Thursday. And then she nods and is all enthusiastic that I'm really engaged in what she's saying. So if you have to look down to type, to do something else, the trick is repeat back those last two words and you really look like you're listening. There's another little trick, a bonus trick here is if you ignore whinges, that's important because sometimes a lot of us in this sector are fixers. We're in this sector to try and help people, to fix people. Men especially are terrible at this. If somebody is talking to us and offloading, we think we have to come up with a list of actions and things to do to fix it, even if it's relevant to job seeking and a current situation or not. Sometimes just ignoring the whinges and letting someone talk to us is actually what really helps them, and they've got it off their chest. Sometimes we don't have to fix every little thing. And then finally, this is interesting again from measuring brain waves and electrical firings. If you use somebody's first name, then they really engage with you a lot more. They become really interested in what you're saying. I don't know if you've ever noticed, but when you're at a party and it's noisy and you can't hardly hear what the person in front of you is saying, if somebody uses your first name across the room, suddenly you can hear it and suddenly your interest is piqued. And it's shown that our brains, again, just like the compliments, they absolutely light up when somebody uses our first name. So if something's not sort of going well, you can see that somebody's a little bit disengaged, keep using their first name. Keep using like, oh, thanks, Hamish. That was a really good question, Hamish. But don't overdo it, obviously. But use somebody's first name and it lights up attention. And there's another trick that I just really was cynical about, but it actually works incredibly, and that's mirroring. If somebody's looking a little bit disengaged while they're talking to you, or you want to improve your engagement, you can do this socially as well as professionally, then mirror their gesticulations, mirror their facial expressions, mirror the words they're using, you're smiling, etc. It really, really works. And I've done the most outrageous mirroring when someone's gesticulating like crazy. I've mirrored them and they haven't even noticed. But what they did do was become energized. They didn't know why, but they were energized. And what happens when you mirror someone is that they weirdly feel like they've known you for years. And then they respond to you like that. And that's because if you've ever noticed older people, perhaps in their 60s, 70s, down the bolo, that are talking to each other, they've known each other for years, you'll notice that they mirror each other, the way they lean in, the way they lean back, the pace of what they're saying, where their hands are resting, the way they're holding their glass. They mirror each other. And if you mirror someone you've just met, subconsciously they'll be saying, I don't know why, but I feel like I've known this person for years. I'm really clicking with them. I really get on with them. And then you've engaged and fast tracked with them. All right. So let's steamroller through the last three key hacks that I thought didn't come under engagement or trust. And that is cognitive load, present bias, and in group. Let's start with in group. No, cognitive load. Right. Cognitive load is so important, particularly at the start of engaging with somebody. Do you know what the impact is on somebody's IQ from the financial stress of being unemployed? There's been a big study out of Boston on this, and the impact is that people suffer. Now, this is annoying, okay, because when you're unemployed and when you're in a certain situation, you want your brain to really work and really push forward. And the trouble is, it doesn't work as well. We have a 13-point loss of IQ. That's the equivalent to staying up all night and then trying to solve a problem the next morning. So we have to keep everything really simple and really easy. There are certain ways of doing this. Using emojis is fine if you're communicating with somebody or emailing. Use imagery where possible instead of words. And there's something called the Eaton-Rosen phenomenon, which you'd never heard of, but you do know it. It means if something rhymes, it's easier to remember. But the studies, and this is what's remarkable, it shows that if something rhymes, the message is trusted more. And then the last point, if a pledge is handwritten, commitment is increasing. I'm sorry, that was terrible. I was desperate to prove the Eaton-Rosen phenomenon, and I think I've proven the opposite. But it's why we called this whole session brain hacking and fast tracking. You remembered it more. So use something, if you can, rhyming in any communication. If you think cognitive load isn't important, then we actually undertook something with apprentices, where for 10 years, this apprenticeship support provider had heavy dropout of apprentices in the first 4 weeks of them signing up. So we said, send us everything that you do, put us through the process that you put an apprentice through. And we were actually able to remove 47% of the content because it was overwhelming, it was repetitive, and it was cut and pasted from the deed and processes that we'd been given from winning the tender. And by reducing that content without contradicting what we had to do in the contract, retention improved by 31%. That is a profound improvement just by making things more concise and reducing cognitive load. So try and do that everywhere you can in your service delivery model. The penultimate tip is the in-group. Try and find common ground. If with evidence that if somebody's long-term unemployed or generationally unemployed, they're in an in-group. So even if, say, this young man I put a picture up of wanted to get a job, even though his dad, his mum, his brother and sister are all unemployed, they will actually subconsciously undermine him without being deliberate because they love him and want what's best for him, but they'll undermine him because he's trying to extract himself from the in-group. That takes a lot of resilience. But the good thing is we can harness this in-group thing. We can align with participants because this power of unity, shared identity, and family actually really makes people bond with us and engage with us a lot more. If you can somehow work into a sentence, oh, when I was unemployed, I found this. Or if you can even bond with somebody over there wearing a certain rugby league club's shirt and you go, oh, I support them, or I went to one of their games. If you can somehow align with them, then they believe you more. And if you can't, then say, oh, this is what I told my brother when he was in that situation or looking for a job. You've got to be authentic with this. Don't start wearing caps back to front and baggy pants halfway down your trousers if you've got a young job seeker with you. So be authentic, but absolutely try and make some sort of link with someone's in group. And then finally, present bias. Have you ever had day glow, nuclear waste looking urine? Now, I'm sure you all have. You're trying to think and you're thinking, what the hell is that question about? And this is part of my peak end of this presentation to make you remember it. I've got a nice image of somebody holding a luminous urine collection beaker with worryingly some liquid dripping off of their fingers. But you have when you've had Barocca. Now, Barocca is one of the most consistent since 1969 and best-selling vitamins in the world. And the reason for that is the trouble with vitamins, we've all done vitamins. We've probably got cupboards full of vitamins that we wanted to start using and supplements, and we never followed through. It's because you don't see that there's any benefit from it. You just think or hope that it's working. The thing with Barocca is the next time you go to the toilet after having one, you have luminous wee, which they say is an accidental byproduct of an excess of vitamin C. But it's not, because there's loads of supplements that have excess vitamin C. It's a deliberate thing so you can see an immediate payoff of actually taking their product. Now, think about what we're doing with our customers. We're asking them to go on courses. We're asking them to do this, to do that, in the hope of some ethereal, distant payoff. The courses, pensions, diets, exercise, that's why these are all so difficult, because there are rarely immediate rewards. So my final point is try and capitalize on something called the endowed progress effect. This is where people respond remarkably well to progress. They're much more likely to return. There was this brilliant study where if you do you know those stamps where loyalty stamps for getting a coffee? Well, if you gave somebody one with 10 spaces on it, and stamped two of them already, they were twice as likely to complete the whole 10 sections than if you gave them an 8 section stamp loyalty card with none of them stamped. So exactly the same number of gaps, but if two were already had some sort of progress stamped on there, it made people twice as likely to follow through. So show participants progress any little way that you can, anything they've done already as well as markers of progress, they will return to you. So there you go. Our one key driver is trust, built through social proof, understanding, and a sense of investment in the customer. Engagement is through anchoring first impressions and listening and mirroring. And then finally, the three key hacks are reduce cognitive load, join their in group, and capitalize upon the present bias. Thank you, everyone. I'm sure I've tried to make sure there's not time for questions, but I'm sure we can squeeze one in. So we'll see how we go, Miss Sally.
Thank you, Darren. That was incredibly informative. And we did cover it. You did cover off on a lot of content there. So if anyone wants to revisit it, we will be sending out or you can grab a copy of the slides, and also there'll be a recording of the presentation available to you once we finish here today. I think we can squeeze in one quick question before we're out of time. Coming back to your gone in 60 seconds question, where you ask people to sort of recap their life in 60 seconds, is there a possibility that that could perhaps make someone feel a little bit rushed, or that you maybe didn't have time to spend with them? And how might someone phrase or pose that question to a person to kind of avoid making it sound like that? Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it is a really relevant question because you would say, "Oh, right, I'm here for you. Tell me your life. You got 60 seconds." It's kind of contradictory. But what happens is that one, they're never usually asked that and given the opportunity. Two, people initially always feel really awkward about it. And three, that's what they concentrate on answering it. Oh my God, how do we go? Sometimes they get it done in 30 seconds, other times they go on to 3 minutes. The import is that they just highlight the key points in their life. So we've never had anyone offended in thousands of occurrences of this that, oh, only 60 seconds. And if they do say that, say, well, take longer. I'm here for you. I'm at your service. So yeah, if you really want to take longer, then you're more than welcome to. Most people only like spending 60 seconds on it because they feel very self-conscious. So yeah, it's a very pertinent and sensitive question, but you'll be surprised how it doesn't come up.
Okay, absolutely. And I guess it all is all in the phrasing and how you pose it to someone um, as well. All right. Well, um, with that in mind, we are drawing close to the end of our session, so we might wrap it up there. If I come across any questions that I haven't been able to get to, there might be a way I can get you some answers post session. But I'd just like to finish up today by saying thank you to Darren for joining us. Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your expertise and the results of some of that research that you've been involved in. I also want to thank Hanif and Olivia for making today possible and doing all the work in the background. And thank you all for joining us to be part of this session. We'll be back again next week, and we look forward to having you all here again then. Have a
Yeah.
lovely rest of the day, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you all. Thanks for coming along, spending your time. Cheerio.